Okay, today's interesting Gemara. Today's daf is daf Nun Tes, and we're going to begin from daf Mem Nun Ches Amid Beis. And the topic of tonight is this pasuk over here. It's a little off topic to Nazir, but it's relevant. The pasuk says over here, Lo yeh kli gever al isha. A man must not put on a woman's clothing, or kli gever, any vessel belonging to a man that's unique for a man should not be on a woman. V'lo yilbash kli gever, and v'lo yilbash gever simlas isha. And a woman is not supposed to wear a man's clothing. Whoever does this is considered to be repulsive by the Eibishter. So that's the topic of tonight. So obviously, what the Gemara for sure wants to address with this pasuk is that it doesn't mean that the pasuk it refers to a man putting on a woman's clothing, because the Torah seems to say it's abominable. So it's something more than just putting on the clothing. So let's see what the Gemara says over here. And here we go. Okay, so we're going from about 9 lines from the bottom. Okay. Let me just get my pointer. Okay, here we go. Amarav, about 9 lines from the bottom of Nuchesim and Beis. Amarav, Mekel Odom Kol Gufa B'Sa'ar. A man is allowed to take a razor blade and take off all the hair of his body with the razor blade. Pashut. And so what's the chiddush? First of all, he's not talking about taking off the beard, or the payas. That's for sure you're not allowed to take off with a razor blade. But any other hair on your body, including basically the underarms, and the underarms, or by your private parts, where it's not normal for a man to do it. Rav says it's not in violation of that pasuk of a man doing what women normally do. It's not in violation of that pasuk. So the Gemara challenges that. I'll ask you a question. Hamavir, if someone mavir is like you use a razor blade. Beis hashachi, your underarms, ubeisa erva, and your private parts. You take off all the pubic hair, okay? And there's a reason for that here. I guess it's to help for infection or friction. So if you do that, if a man does that, the Brisa says hareza loika, you get malchus. More than that, not only is it not permitted, but you're actually in violation of that law. So how did Rav say it's permitted? Answers the Gemara, ha b'tar, ha b'misporayim. The brisa that says you get a violation is only if you're using a razor blade, right? And therefore, you're actually doing what women normally do, and that's in violation of that law. But ha b'misparayim. But if you're using here scissors, then it's not a problem. Rav was talking about using a scissors. Says the Gemara, the right away question. Rav nami b'tar kamar. Rav himself said, you're allowed to use a razor blade. Notice the words of Rav, Mekel Adam Kol Gufay B'Sa'ar. You're allowed to use a razor blade. Answers the Gemara, Rav didn't mean you can use a razor blade. He meant ke'ein tar. You're allowed to use something similar to a razor blade, which is scissors. Actually, using a razor blade will be in violation of the law. But using a scissors and cutting underneath your arms and the private parts, there's nothing, according to Rav, it's totally permitted. Amar Rab Chia bar Abba, Amar Rab Yochanan. Rab Yochanan disagrees. Rab Yochanan says, Hamave beisa shechi u beisa erva loika. Rab Yochanan says that if you take off the hair from your private parts or underneath the arm, you get malchus. So Rab Yochanan seems to go very strict on this. You get malchus midaraisa. Ameisvei comes along the Gemara and asks a question against Rab Yochanan. There's another brisa that says, "Ha'avara seir einam b'divrei soifrim, divrei Torah elam b'divrei soifrim." The taking off the hair on your body is not minat Torah. Is nothing also minat Torah. It's only midrabanan. So how did Rabbi Yochanan say you get a full-fledged malchus if you actually take off the hair of your underarms? And says the Gemara, "My loika nami dekama midrabanan." That loika means that's midrabanan. Rabbi Yochanan said that midrabanan you get the malchus. Now, the fact is that the Gemara did not say that Rabbi Yochanan was talking about a razor blade or something like that. It seems to be that Rabbi Yochanan was even talking midrabanan, and he's even talking about using scissors. So Rabbi Yochanan our understanding of Rabbi Yochanan is that even with scissors, cutting that hair off is also midrabanan, and you would get malchus midrabanan. That the rabbis, if someone is violation of that, the rabbis have a right to give him their own version of malchus. So that's that's exactly what the Brisa says, that you get an avera midivrei soifrim. So we go now to Daf on the top of the page of Nuntes Amud Aleph. We're on top of the page. Ika de Amrei, others have a different version of what Rabbi Yochanan said. So till now, Rabbi Yochanan said it's also midrabanan. Amar Rabbi Chia Baraba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Hamava Beisa Shechi Beisa Erva, Loika, you do get malchus. And he says, not a malchus midrabanan, you get the malchus mishum layilbash geva simlas isha, that a man should not put on the clothing of a woman. So therefore, he says that if you actually take it off, not even with the razor blade, but even with scissors, it seems that it would get a lavda oraisa. So the Mace asks a question. The Brisa says that you only get an Issa D'Rabbanan if you take off the hair, the pubic hair, and the underarm hair. It's only D'Rabbanan. How did Rabbi Yochanan say in this version that you get an Issa D'Oraisa? Answers the Gemara, who Da'ama Kahaitana. Rabbi Yochanan aligned himself up with a Tana. And therefore, there is actually a Tana that says that if you take off any of the hair underneath your arm, you're in violation of that lav. Tanya, we learned in a Brisa, whoever takes off the hair under his arms or by his private parts, he's in violation of a person doing something that women do. That even though the pasuk says lo yilbash geva simlas isha, that a man should not put the clothing of a woman on, this is one of those psukim that are not taken literally. It's not taken literally that a man should not allowed to put on a woman's clothing, although it's common, but that's not the lav. The lav is doing something that's specifically women-like, and that the Gemara, according to this Tana, is removing any hair on your body that's not on your head, from the Beis HaShachi and Beis HaErba. Now, the Tana Kama, but there's other opinions that say no. If you take the hair from underneath your arms and by the private part, it's only Issa D'Rabbanan. So then, hi lo yilbash geva my darish be. What's he going to use lo yilbash geva? How is he going to interpret that pasuk? Obviously, the Gemara understands it cannot mean literally. It's one of those psukim that you cannot mean literally that a man can't put on a woman's clothing. So how is the Tanakama going to say what that lav is talking about? The boy Tanya. So that Tana learns like the following Brisa. The Brisa says lo yia kli gever al isha, that a man should not put on a woman is not allowed to put on the kalim of a man. She's not allowed to wear things that are normally worn by a man. Ma Talmud loima. What's this pasuk really trying to say? Im shelo yilbash ish simlas isha. If the pasuk is saying that a man should not put on the clothing of the woman, the isha simlas ish, or the woman not supposed to put on the man's clothing, that cannot be the literal translation of the pasuk, and that's what the pasuk is referring to. Why? Harei kvar nema to'evihi. But the pasuk continues in saying, by doing something like that, it's repulsive. It's almost used, the word to'eva usually refers to something of znus character, something of adultery. Just for a man putting on a woman's clothing, a woman putting on a man's clothing is not an adulterous action. The ein kan te'eva, it's not an adulterous action. So that cannot be what the pasuk is referring to. So the Brisa says, Ella, it means like this. The pasuk, he learns the pasuk literally, but it's missing a few words in the pasuk. Shelo yilbash is simlas isha. A man should not put on the clothing of the woman. And here's the key: v'yeshiv ben anoshim. And by putting on woman's clothing, people mistake him for a woman and allow him to sit amongst women, and that leads to adultery. Because here's this man who's in the woman's restroom, and that's the isser, because it leads to adultery. Isha simlas ish. Now the opposite also: a woman is not allowed to put on the clothing of a man, And the pasuk didn't speak it out, but means v'teisha ben arashim. The act of violation of the law is only after the woman, after putting on a man's clothing, is sitting amongst men. So that's the isser. If they're doing it for a purpose so that they can be secluded with the opposite gender, so that they can do znus, that is the law of the Torah. Okay, so that's how this Tana would learn. It's not stam that a man taking off the hair under his arm, that's the law. That's only drabanan. But what the Doraisa is referring to is if you put on a man's or woman's clothing just so that you can be with the opposite gender, that's the Isser. Rab Lezer ben Yaakov has another interpretation of that pasuk. So his interpretation is much less literal. How do we know a woman is not allowed to carry a weapon that's used for war? For example, a sword or a gun. How do you know that? The Talmud Bavli, that's what the pasuk means to say. Lo yia kli gever al isha. The normal vessel, the normal weapon that's for a man should not be on a woman. And then what does lo yilbash gever simlash isha? What does the opposite mean? What does a man should not put on the clothing of a woman? What is that referring to? Lo yisakein ish b'tikune isha. A man should not fix himself up with the kind of way a woman fixes herself up, which means putting on makeup and eyeshadow and the like. That's what Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov's interpretation of the pasuk is. And obviously, probably it's also because if a man specifically looks like a woman, he just wants to be around women, so it leads to adultery. So according to what the Gemara just learned now, that at the very least, it's also midrabanan to cut off any of your hair under your arms and the private parts. At least it's also midrabanan. Amar Rav Nachman says, the nazir mutar. Once you're a nazir and you're cutting off every part of your body, all your hair, the nazir is only cutting off his head, the hair on his head. Once he's already cutting off his hair, so by cutting off the hair under your arm is not a problem. Why? Because it shows that he's not so doing it to look beautiful, because by cutting off your hair, you're already looking like funny looking. So at that point, when you're making yourself look funny, then taking off the hair is not a woman-like thing to do. When is the Isser to do this woman-like thing is if you're just taking it off and you're leaving your rest of your hair on your head and you're looking normal. So that's usser, because that's you're trying to beautify yourself like a woman. But if you're a nazir and you're already shaving your head off, then that is that according to Rav Nachman was permitted. But the Gemara says the halacha is not like Rav Nachman, that even a nazir is not allowed to do that, right? So that's what that's what it says over here. The Taisa says that it's also even for a nazir. And Taisus is of the opinion that even using, you're going to see later that Taisus is of the opinion that even using scissors is awesome. Look at the following story. Amrule Rabbanan Rab Shimon bar Abba. The Rabbanan told Rab Shimon bar Abba. Okay, the students came to Rab Shimon bar Abba and they went to the mikvah. Okay, and they were shocked. What did they find? Chazinu leil Rabbi Yochanan. We found Rabbi Yochanan. The last day he has no hair under his arm. So they were like, oh, shock. How did Rabbi Yochanan cut his hair under his arm? Now, the Gemara, Rabbi Shimon bar Abba was trying to explain to the students, could have said that Rabbi Yochanan used a scissor. But the fact is that he's not permitted to use a scissor, because the way the Gemara is learning now, that even with a scissor, it would be also midrabanan. So Rabbi Shimon bar Abba answered that the reason why Rabbi Yochanan did not have hair under his arm, you see how kids don't get it. It's really, he had hair, but because of old age, it fell out. So that's why you didn't see hair under Rabbi Yochanan's armpit. Says the Gemara, there was this Yid who Rab Ami had to give Malchus. Whatever, he violated something against the court. It's not midoraisa that this guy needed Malchus. It's the court. The powerful Jewish court at that time had the right to give somebody Malchus. So there was this Jew who was in violation of some law, Rabbanan law, And Rabbi Ami's court decided that they're supposed to give him malchus. So as they undressing the guy, Iglai Beishechi, they saw his armpit. Chazai Deloy Megalach. They saw that he's not a guy that shaves under his arm. Now, it was common for even men at that time to shave under their arms. So they saw that this guy is not such an Amaritz. He might be worthy. They may have misjudged him. Amalon Rabbi Ami said, Shifku, leave him alone. Don't give him any more malchus. Dain min chavrayahu. He's from our group. In other words, he's not a non-frumah, so to speak, or somebody who's on his way to convert to Christianity or some other religion. He's one of us, and therefore we don't give him a malchus. The fact is that he was embarrassed, actually showing his whole body in court and they seeing his arm. That was enough of the punishment that the guy deserved. So Rabbi Ami upheld he held up, I should say, that they should not give him malchus. The Gemara asked the question again. Rav asked for Rab Chia, Mahu legaleach. Are you allowed to? I guess this was Rav when he was younger, even though he said before you're allowed. Rav was the opinion that you could shave under your arms, but when he was younger, I guess he asked this question from his uncle Rab Chia, and Rab Mahu legaleach. He asked the question of his uncle, what's your opinion on the matter? Can a man shave under his arm and his private parts? Amalei, so Rav Chia answered, Aser. It's not permitted. Amalei, so Rav asked his uncle, V'al but they're going to grow so long and they cause a lot of discomfort. If you have very long hair under your arm, it's going to cause a lot of discomfort. So why should it be Aser? It's not a ladylike thing to do. You're just preventing discomfort. Amalei, so he answered, Bar Pasche, you're a little foolish. Zaman yesh loy. There's a certain time and a certain amount that the hair under the arm grows. Posman shuhu gadol, when it gets too big, noisher, unusual. The hair under your arms, when it grows so big, long, it automatically falls out. So you don't have to worry about that. Only on the hair of the head, you can grow that very, very long like a hippie. That never falls out. But the hair under the arm has a natural thing to it that Rab Chia explained to this young Rav that it's never going to be in a situation where it'll cause you discomfort, because it will automatically fall out by itself. Now the Gemara asked, Boya Menei Rav Rab Chia. But Rav, I guess he was going to define his opinion later on in life that it's mutter. But he wanted to hear, maybe his uncle would agree. Somehow it would be mutter. So Rav asked Rab Chia, how about this? Hello? Yeah, how about this? He asked him, can a person use instead of scissors, instead of a razor blade, he'll take his finger and scratch the hair off under his arm. So maybe that's not like ladylike. Amalei, Rab Chia was strict about it. Usr, even to scratch with the fingers and cause the hair to fall out, that's usr. So Rav says, is there any way to do it? Bigdoi mahu. Can I use my clothing? In other words, I'm going to wear my shirt. And I'm going to just pull under my arm to pull the hair out. That's not ladylike? Is that usr? So Rav Chia finally acquiesced and he says, in that scenario, mutter, there would be mutter. But Ika de Amri, others have a different version of what Rav asked Rav Chia regarding using, regarding touching under your arm while wearing your shirt. It had nothing to do with pulling the hair out under your arm. What happens if somebody during davening touched his underarms, even though he was wearing a shirt? Does he have to wash his hands, or is that permitted in the middle of davening? Amalei, so Rav Chia said, Osir, that's not permitted. But the halacha is not like Rav Chia. In the middle of davening, you could touch under your arm if you're wearing a shirt because you're not touching the body. So therefore, since you're not touching your flesh, it's mutter because your hands are not going to get sweaty or dirty, and that would not be considered a violation during davening. So again, what you walk away from this sugya is that it seems that the Gemara is bending towards, at the very least, cutting off the hair on the private parts and under the arm is at the very least asur d'Rabbanan. According to some opinions, that is what the pasuk is telling you, that it's asur mid'oraisa. The Mishnah continues on Amud Beis. We began earlier this week. This continues this discussion. If two people were Nazirs at the same time, that was the beginning of the parak. That's why it's called Shnei Nazirim. And the first Mishnah said that if two people became a Nazir at the same time, and somebody who was far away from them was looking through binoculars and watching how a piece of human flesh hit one of them. And so now one Nazir is a Safek Tameh, one Nazir is Tameh, one is Tahar. But he didn't know which one is the Tameh, which one is the Tahar. So how do you resolve this dilemma? So the Mishnah said that you, at the end of 30 days, you bring a Safek carbon Tumah, and a Safek carbon Tahara, right? Then you repeat that at the second you do one at the second time around. You do one carbon Tahara at the second time around. So that was the din if you have two Nazirs and you have a Safek with one of them, if they're a Safek Tamei, a Safek Tmei Meis. Okay? So now the Mishnah continues. What would happen? Meis Echad Mehem. Wow. Again, two people who are Nazirs at the same time. One of them became a Safek Tmei Meis, right? One of them became a Safek Tmei Meis. They told him, hey, one of you touched a dead body or got touched by a human flesh. We don't know which one of you. Fine. But then what happened? One of the two died. So this guy himself, the remaining guy, he's one person left. He's a Safek Tahar or a Safek Tmei Meis. So how does he get out of this dilemma? So Amar Rabbi Yeshua came up with this, roundabout way, more like a puzzle type of way. What he says is like this: this one guy who's a Safek Tahar or Safek Nazir Tamei, he doesn't know if he's a Nazir Tahar or Nazir Tamei. He should find somebody in the shuk who wants to be a Nazir and to help him out. And this guy who's going to be a Nazir to help him out is going to have to be a Nazir for 60 days. And he says the following, and listen, you have to pay attention closely. He says like this: you're not a Nazir for 60 days, but you're really a Nazir for 30 days, but you have to be Noyeg Naziris for 60 days. And he's going to say like this: in Tameh, you see, if I was a Tameh person, but it turns out I'm the Tameh, I want you to be a Nazir right away. And at the end of 30 days, you're going to bring your Naziris Tahara, and I'm going to bring a Nazir Tameh. Fine. Vim Tara, you see, but if I'm turned out to be the Tar, if I was a Tar Nazir, I want you to be Arei at the Nazir Achash Leishim Yom. I want you to start the Naziris after 30 days. So you're a Nazir for 30 days, but we don't know if you're a Nazir for the first 30 or the second 30. That's for the second guy who's helping him out. Okay? So during the first time, after the first 30 days, you'll see how this all comes together. They count 30 days. Okay? So you have a guy who's a Safek Tamei and a Safek Tar, and a guy who joined him on this journey. He doesn't know if he's a Nazir now or not. Umaviyum carbon tuma, the carbon tahara. They bring a carbon tuma, which basically means they bring a carbon oila sa'if. Again, if you remember that a Nazir who's a Tamei has to bring two birds, one's an oila, one's a chatas, and he also brings an asham, right? This sheep for an asham. Fine. Those are the Nazir. But a Nazir who's a Safek Tamei, right, cannot bring an asham because maybe he's bringing chulin on the mizbeach for no reason. He cannot bring he could only bring the oila. He could only bring the chata sa'of, a bird. So all you do is like you do a malika on this bird and you sprinkle the blood on the mizbeach, but you're not throwing anything on the mizbeach because you're only a Safek, right? The carbon tahara, and you bring all the carbonas tahara. Because you say like this: Im ani hu tamei, if I was the tamei, carbon tuma shali, that bird that I makrav as a carbon tuma, that's mine. The carbon tahara shalcha, and all these carbonas tahara are you. Remember, for a nazir tahara, you have to bring three animals. One over here is a lady, female sheep for a chatas, a male sheep for an oila, and for shlamim you got to bring a ram, like this animal. So you bring all these karbanis, and you say like this: if I was the tamei, then the carbon tam I brought on my behalf, that bird is mine. The carbon tahala shalcha, and all these three animals, they're your animals, because it turns out you were supposed to be the nazir for the first 30 days. V'im anihu atar, if I was tar, then carbon tahara shali, all these three animals are mine. The carbon tuma besafik, and you, the carbon tama is like a donation. I didn't, nothing went wrong by bringing. Nobody had to bring a carbon tama, because it turns out that the guy that died, the person that died was the tame. So I didn't have to bring it. And you do one giluach. This guy, who the remaining surviving nazir, he does the giluach. The other person that joined him, he may have not even been a nazir. So he does not bring his carbon. He does not do a galuach. Then the Mishnah says, "V'soifrim shloishim yoim." They count another 30 days, and carbon tahara, and they bring a carbon tahara, and and he says like this: Im ani hatame. If I was the tame, right? That means the surviving nazir says, if I was the tame, then the carbon tuma shali. Then the first round of carbonas, the first bird that I brought as a carbon, that was my carbon tame. Now at the end of 30 days, the carbon tahara shalcha, and the carbon tahara that I brought at the end of the first 30 was yours. V'zeh, and at the end of the 60s, these new carbon tahara that I'm bringing, right, is carbon tahara C, is my carbon tahara. Vim ani hu hatar, if it turns out at the end of the first 30, I was a nazir tar, because my partner that died was the nazir tame, and I was always a nazir tar. Then the first time around, carbon tahara shali, the carbon tahara was mine. The carbon tuma besafik, and the carbon tuma we could ignore because it was brought anyway in doubt. The zehu, and this carbon that we're bringing right now, as at the end of 60 days, is carbon taharaska. That's your carbonis. So basically, Rabbi Yeshua came up with this idea: you need a partner to help you get out of this mess. Amalai, and by the way, you bring two teglachas at the end of because manavshach. The second guy could also do teglachas to cut his hair, because he's a carbon, he's a nazir vadai, and he was a carbon, he was a suffix, he shaved his hair. The first time maybe he was a tame, and the second time maybe he's a tahara. Amalai ben Zayma, but Ben Zayma did not like Rabbi Yeshua's concoction. Mi shemea loy sheyida kenegdei ben nazir. Who's going to listen to this crazy idea to find somebody who's going to want to be a nazir for 60 days, although he's only going to get the reward of being a nazir for 30 days, because he doesn't know when his naziris is going to begin. Either it's going to begin the first 30 or the second 30. Ella, says the Gemara, Ella says Rabbi Ben Zoma came up with another idea. Maybe chatas oilas behema. At the end of 30 days, he brings a chatas oif and one oilas behema. And he says, in tamayisi, if I'm the tamay, a chatas b'chayvasi, that I'm required to bring the chatas, va'oila, and this oila, instead of bringing for my naziris tahara, nadava is a total donation. Vim tara yisi, if I'm a tar, so then at the end of 30 days, ha'oila mechayvasi, then the oila I'm supposed to bring the oila. And the chatas misafik, and the chatas I'm bringing is misafik, because I didn't have to bring. No, I'm not a tameh. So the oila will be the first of my carbonas, the first of the carbonas that I'm supposed to bring. So basically, he's going to bring this male sheep as an animal at the end of the first 30. Then he then he counts another 30 days. Maybe carbon tahara, and he brings the carbon tahara. He counts the 30 days. And in first time, he can do this right away, but at the end of the 30. But the second time, he counts another 30 days, and he brings the carbon tahara. Boyman, he says, Im tameh, if I was a tameh at the end of the first 30 days, the first oila that I brought was nothing. I was not supposed to. And then the oilers that I'm bringing right now is an obligation. Vim tar yisi, if it turns out I was tar, oiler rishayna chayva v'zu nedava. Then the first oiler was a chayva, and this one is going to be an nedava. V'zu shar kabani, and then I'm bringing the other kabanis. So the Rabbi Ben Zoyma's idea was that the first time around you bring an oiler as maybe it's an obligation, maybe it's a donation. The second time around, you bring all the rest of the karbanos, but again, the oil will be, maybe it's an obligation, maybe it's a donation because you fulfilled your obligation during the first time around. But the other, the chatas and the shlamim, you for certainly could bring. And therefore, one guy could solve his own problem. So, but the problem with Ben Zoma's idea was that you're bringing the oila you're bringing your karbanos tahara, but you're splitting it up. At the end of the first 30 days, you're bringing the oila, and at the end of the second 30 days, you're bringing the chatas and the shlamim. So Rabbi Yeshua says, I don't like that idea. Amar Rabbi Yeshua, nimtza maybe karbanos of the chatzayim. You're splitting up your karbanos. As a nazir tahara, you should try to bring all the karbanos at one shot. And according to your idea, Ben Zoma, you're bringing the oila at the end of the first 30, and the chatas and the shlamim potentially at the end of the second 30. The Chachamim agreed to Ben Zoma that his idea is good. It's better to do that idea than to try to bring somebody from the street who's going to agree to be a nazir for 60 days. And the Gemara doesn't understand. V'laisi, what's Rabbi Yeshua's problem? What's wrong with splitting up the karbanos? Doesn't nazir have to bring all his karbanos on the same day? He could bring his oila at the end of 30, and then at the end of the other 30, he should bring the chatas and ashim. What's the Rabbi Yehuda's problem with that? The whole concept of this Rabbi Yeshua bringing another person is only to make it complicated, to sharpen the student's mind. See, a Rebbe is not enough to teach law to the students or teach Torah to the students. It's also important for the Rebbe to teach the students how to think abstractly in all types of ways to sharpen their minds. And that's why Rabbi Yeshua suggested his idea, although Ben Zoma was had the simple solution, most logical and simple solution. Amar Rav Nachman said another idea. My levet le Rabbi Yeshua ledake de lisrei. Rav Nachman said even Rabbi Yeshua's case is so funny because if you get at the end of the 60 days, two people, if you're bringing somebody else from the street, you're going to have to shave off the heads of two different people, and during that time, the intestines of the karbanos are going to turn to spoil because in order to do the tenufa, you have to shave off the heads. So that takes time and it will spoil. In other words, Rav Nachman said, like tongue in cheek, Rabbi Yeshua whole solution to this problem is very funny, and therefore, again, what the Gemara is saying that Ben Zoma had the most simple solution to this problem. And Ben Zoma saw it straight through, and Yeshua just said his statement only to sharpen the Talmidim. Very appropriate before Pesach to learn something about Ben Zoma. Anyway, that's it.